Please welcome John Calame.
Thank you. I appreciate your attention tonight. I'm speaking to you about a group of people known as the Roma, but we know them as the Gypsies, who have been in Europe for about 400 years and who may be the most despised minority in the world. I spent 9 months in Rome looking at the conditions of their life now in major Italian cities. And I took inspiration from Martin Luther King, who urges us to get above the anecdotal level and to find the governing logic behind discrimination. So I compared these new ghettos with older ghettos, in particular the Jewish ghettos of the 16th century in Italy. Anyway, the Roma people live in very squalid conditions in containers. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, this isn't the Roma, this would be the Native American reservation in New Mexico. I throw this in just to remind us that ghettos are not an old and forgotten thing, they're a living thing. So, we've got them, they've got them, why do we build these boxes? If I had to summarize my overarching thoughts on the subject, this would be the summary. It's not about either me or you. We don't have to use a scarcity model anymore. So, the Roma population right now in Italy and throughout Europe is suffering in an unearned way. And there are two versions of this story, at least. The Italian government has hit side. They're trying to do something with this unworkable population. And what they're doing is vaguely represented by these dots. The center green thing is central Rome. You see the Tiber running north-south. And the dots are 18 Roma camps that exist around Rome alone. The blue ones are authorized, paid for by the Italian state. And you can see that in general, the red dots were unauthorized camps. The blue dots built by the state are moving further and further out from the center, making life harder and harder for the people who live in them. So we have a condition of conspicuous squalor. And my research indicates, and it's not at all original, that this is nothing new, and it's not accidental. Just to be a little bit more specific about some of those dots, if you lived in one of those camps near the periphery of Rome, you would walk on average 8 kilometers to get to the nearest hospital, 4 to the nearest elementary school, and 3.5 to get your groceries. And since most of the water is not drinkable, you would be coming home with water too. So we ran the numbers, we measured simple things. It's not rocket science. What I want to point out to you is that arrow pointing down on that blue bar. That bar is looking at the average living space per person in these metal containers that are provided by the Italian state. That blue bar was the legal minimum, and the other bars were the actual areas. So in sum, on average, the Roma people in Italy have, per person, 41% of the legal minimum area per person that you are allowed to build according to the Roman building code. So they're living with that double standard. So let's take a look at these containers. I spent quite a bit of time in the camps looking at them myself. Here's a kind of typical example. I threw in this kind of nice queen-size bed, which you don't actually see in those very often, just to give you a sense of how claustrophobic it is. Very little of my furniture or your furniture would fit. And if you had 4 or 5 or 6 children, which many of these families do, your guess is as good as mine about where they would sleep or play or eat or bathe. So we have metal boxes that were designed as shipping containers used for human beings, paid for, again, in large contracts by the Italian government. This is one of those containers that's about 8 years old in one of those peripheral authorized camps. This is the Italian government's solution to the problem of these people that do not fit into the economy, do not want to assimilate to Italian culture. And so their punishment is to live open-endedly in places like this. This is a slightly newer camp, so the containers look a little bit better. But you'll notice on that pole, or maybe you wouldn't notice, but there's a surveillance camera up on that pole. There's lots of those poles all around this camp. There's a fence, there's a gate, there's a policeman there 24 hours a day, and there are cameras looking in at every angle. So the last time I checked, that's called a penal colony. I mentioned that it's useful to look at other examples because we're trying to get the gist, the governing logic, not just the narrative of each case. So here's Rome in 1566 when the Jews were forced by a papal edict into the Jewish ghetto, which is blown up there. So, okay, the Jewish ghetto at that time was, of course, a disaster. It was incredibly dense. There was no place to play. The sanitary conditions were horrible. And it's really not so different now if we just kind of overlay life in the Roma camps in 2010. We have another group of people that just doesn't fit in. But again, to try to convince you to come along with me to think about this systematically, I bracketed out here all of the Jewish ghettos from the 16th and 17th century in the Italian city-states. You can see there were a lot of them, but that's not even my point. My point is they came in clusters, and the clusters correspond not to whimsy or to just general anti-Semitism, but to very easily defined political events, which are kind of labeled there on the left-hand side. So if we turn that graph, we can see that certain things come down the pike, like the papal bull against the Jews, and then suddenly you have whole clusters of ghettos being created by politicians who had a problem that they needed to solve. These boxes solve specific problems. And they can't just do it on a dime, they have to set the stage. And the way they usually do it, whether it's the 16th century or the 21st century, is by creating a sense of crisis and emergency and scaring people into thinking that basic law and order are being compromised, so that something really extreme has to happen. In the case of Italy, they issued that emergency decree that gives them full police powers and warrantless arrests against the Roma. So in the end, one has to sort of wonder, is this a test that the EU is now failing in terms of how to deal with a minority population? I would say it is. Thanks for your attention.